items, and this is a special meeting, so everybody would need to agree to add them, first of all. So one is an update on the federal project that several board members, as well as.
Okay, Mayor, we're live.
Okay, thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb. I want to call to order today the Board of Aldermen special meeting for Thursday, May 21st. I want to thank everybody for joining. The agenda is right in front of you. I'd like to ask for approval on this agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
There are a few items that I wanted to suggest adding to this agenda. It's a special meeting, so everybody would need to approve those items, and I'll tell you what they are. The one is the update on the federal project that several board members and town manager, Mr. Gilbride, have been in meetings about. I thought it would be good to give the board an update on that. The other one would be the update on staff's efforts to prepare for this holiday weekend. And then also discuss the state of emergency and if there's any modifications needed for that. Any discussion about those items?
I have a question about phase 5. When was there any discussion or any notification ahead of today's meeting with regard to the fact that we were going to talk about it today?
The discussion today was just to update me and the other board members on the meetings that you guys have been in. No
Okay.
additional topics, Mr. Leonard.
Okay. Mike, you look like you want to say something. I'm just curious because I didn't know about it until now that you wanted to talk about that.
I had just asked if we could put it on the agenda, again, not
Okay.
just to bring the board up to the same level of understanding that you guys are at, because I haven't been in those meetings,
Okay.
and neither is Mr. Peters. There's no additional topics or discussion, Tom, other than
Okay.
that.
And we
Do
really
you have a
should-
concern about that? I'm sorry,
Mayor-
Brian.
Mayor, since this is a special meeting, and I understand Alderman Leonard was just seeking clarification as to why that was requested. The first item of business, I think, with respect to adding anything to the agenda without substantive debate should be whether everyone consents to it. And then if everyone does consent to it, we can engage in debate as you see fit. Again, I understand Alderman Leonard was just saying he wanted some clarification, but I would caution us not to start getting into substantive debates on items that aren't in the notice unless there's unanimous consent to add it to this agenda. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Eads.
My only point is that I was a member of those meetings. And if we were going to talk about them today, I would have appreciated a heads up in the form of a phone call or an email to let me know to be prepared to discuss what went on in those meetings and do a little bit of homework. That's my issue. I have no issue with respect to us discussing it, but I would have liked to have maybe been a bit more prepared.
Are they talking?
Understood?
I don't think that we are really going to go
Speaker
into
on?
details or make any decisions today. We're just going to have the town manager give us an update on the conversations that we had last week. That's all.
You can't hear what's going on in the meeting.
I didn't come
Well, then you better count them.
talk about the details of the.
You've got to
Okay.
interrupt
Is
them.
that what you want?
Can't hear a
Yes,
thing.
sir.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with it.
Then can I have a motion to approve the agenda with the items that
Interrupt them.
add to it being an update on the federal project,
The
preparation for the Memorial Day weekend, and the state of emergency?
Can you hear them?
I
You've got to
move
do
that
something.
we add those additional items to the agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, before we vote,
Yes, sir.
Mayor, before we vote, Mr. Peters, can you hear me, sir? Alderman Peters, can you hear me? This is Brian Eads, Town Attorney.
Hi, Brian. I can hear you now very lightly.
Okay,
but I haven't been hearing things for the last 2 or 3 minutes.
that's what I surmised, sir. What we are doing is adding an item to the agenda to discuss the status of the federal project. And so a motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda with the addition of the federal project status. The
Okay.
clerk is about to call the roll on that. And if at any point, Mr. Peters, you cannot hear us, please interrupt us and let us know.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about where we are at the moment, Mr. Peters? As I just described it? Alderman Peters? Alderman Peters? He might be on
Yes.
mute. I can't. Okay. All right. I believe the clerk's going to call the roll on approving the agenda with that amendment.
Laura, can you call roll, please?
Yes. Alderman Leonard.
Aye.
Mayor Pro
Uh,
Alderman Peters. Alderman Peters.
Aye.
And I don't know about the rest of you. I'm getting some significant feedback. I don't know if somebody needs to mute somewhere else. I'm trying to mute mine unless I'm talking.
I think last time we did this, Deb, we had all taken our earphones out and muted and had one laptop on.
You can certainly do that. I'm hearing you guys just fine. It was just a minute ago, there was a little bit of feedback, but it seemed to have cleared up.
Okay. Maybe what we can do is, because we've got one speakerphone on as well. So if Laura needs to speak into the speakerphone, maybe just step away as far as she can from the laptop in the room. We could try that and see if that helps. Okay, so we have got approval of the agenda. The next item on here is to accept Alderman Hyde's resignation. So do we have a motion to do that?
Joanne, I couldn't hear you there. I'm sorry.
Mr. Peters, is that better?
Yes, that was slightly better. Yes, Joanne.
We have a motion to accept Mr. Hyde's resignation that he submitted for his alderman position, and I had asked for a motion.
Okay, and I voted aye.
Okay. We need someone to make a motion first, Mr. Peters.
Okay. I'll make the motion that we accept the resignation of Jerry Hyde as alderman.
Thank you, sir.
second.
Your second? Discussion? Yes, please.
You've seen Jerry Hyde's email? Have you seen Jerry Hyde's email? Okay. I just want to say that, I'm very frustrated with what's happened. I feel like I've read Jerry's email. I think he did a really good job of encapsulating and describing why he left. And I agree with him. I have those same frustrations. And I share his views on many of those issues. And I admire him for sending out that email and describing in detail what he feels is wrong here. You can probably tell by my body language, I'm not a really happy guy today being here. The difference between Jerry and I is I've got just a few more years of skin in the game here than he does. And as frustrated as I am, I'm not going anywhere. But I admire him for having the character and having and just sending out the email. I can't even discuss it. I'm so frustrated with it. So I appreciate what he did, and I appreciate what he's done for the town, dating all the way back to the BEST committee, going on 13 years ago. That's all I have to say.
Clerk, can you call the roll? Any other discussion? Can you call the roll, please?
Alderman Leonard,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Aye.
Alderman Peters,
Aye.
The next item on the agenda is to ratify the vote for Alderman Swantack, and I'm going to turn that over to Attorney Eads, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The North Carolina General Statutes, Section 160A-69, governs when a mayor votes to break a tie. And that statute provides that only when there is an equal yay, an equal nay, or equal yes or no vote, does the mayor vote. Historically in the town, when we have appointed vacancies and have elected the mayor pro tem, I know of at least 2, if not 3 occasions where it would be the nomination method, and then there would be equal votes for differing people, and the mayor would vote to break the tie. Procedurally, that's inaccurate because there's not an equal number of yay or nay votes. So I apologize for not catching that at the last meeting where Mr. Swantack was voted upon. It's my understanding he has since been sworn in. However, given that procedural irregularity, I think it's best that we address that today. If you go the route of nomination and without yay and nay votes, then the mayor would not vote to break a tie. So given the history of the town and the number, equal number, well, I guess we don't have an equal number on the board now. We may want to vote to suspend the rules and make that appointment by a up or down vote per nominee. Again, now that we don't have an equal number of board members, I don't know that it matters, but then again, I don't know how people are going to vote. If they vote consistently with what I've heard last time, I think I know the outcome, but I don't want to presume that. So again, I apologize for not catching that at the last meeting. It's to me, it's a distinction without a difference. If you've got 2 people voting, 1 person and 2 people voting for another, clearly their preference is the person that they voted for. However, the statute says what it says, and I would like to I asked for this meeting and I asked for this item to be put on the agenda to clean that up. So having said that, we can either first have a motion to suspend the rules to appoint the vacancy by a motion and vote, or B, you can do the nomination process as we did last time. One other thing I noted too, I wasn't there physically, but it's my understanding that the written ballots last time were not signed. That true, that too is a procedural irregularity. If you elect to go written ballots, the alderman needs to put his name on the ballot. With Mr. Peters not being there, to me, I don't see any sense of not doing everything verbally. I mean, I can't tell where each of you are. I'm not there. I know that Mr. Peters is not there in person, and I can't tell with Mr. Leonard or Mr. Benson or where you are, Mayor. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, but that was the purpose of this item. I can't hear anyone talking if any of you are.
There we go. Just so you do know, and everybody attending does know, Alderman Leonard, Mayor Pro Tem Benson, myself, and Mr. Swantek, we are in the room here with staff. Mr. Peters and yourself, Mr. Eads, are attending remotely. So at this point, we need to ask for a motion, as Mr. Eads recommended, either to A, suspend the vacancy and motion and vote, or go through the nomination process again. Is there a preference of the board?
At what point can we engage in discussion with the attorney on this issue? Because I have a concern.
Yes, I'll just caution you that if it gets into the realm of legal advice, that would be better suited to preserve the attorney-client privilege in closed session. But I think any clarification questions you have would be appropriate to discuss right now, because I've introduced the item.
Okay, I'm sure that you'll stop me if I go too far, Brian. You're pretty good at that. Here's my concern. There's been a substantial change to the dynamic and the makeup of the board since we handled this item on the 7th of the month. We've lost a board member, in part because of how this turned out. And by losing that board member, it changes the dynamic of what is going to ultimately be decided today. And I believe that what we're going to do today is really, in effect, we're going to essentially legitimize an improperly made selection, not improperly from the individual who was selected, but how it was done, rather than starting this process over. And even if we do start it over, because now the way the board is comprised of basically only 3 board members, the result's not going to be the same. Does that make sense, Brian?
I understand what you're saying. Obviously, I can't speculate as to, well, I can't say for any certainty, Alderman Leonard, that the result would have been the same had I been cognizant of that and caught it, and we kept going at the last meeting. I do believe that the result would have been the same. But again, since that didn't happen, then that's just me, my best guess. None of us know exactly what would have happened had we kept going that night through the nomination process. Regardless, since none of the ballots were signed, even if it had been done appropriately, without the mayor voting for a tie, that vote would have been invalid as well. And we'd be right here now anyway, because the ballots weren't signed. I can't speak to Mr. Hyde. I understand what you're saying about the reason why he left. That was his choice. And we find ourselves where we are now. I mean, I can't force someone to not resign. I too am thankful that Jerry did serve, and he's done a lot for the town, and I think a lot of Jerry. We are where we are, and we need to fill this vacancy, and I am concerned that since Mr. Swantek has been sworn in, that needs to be addressed immediately.
All right, well, one final point, please.
Yes, sir.
I believe what we should be doing instead today is reopening and re-examining all 9 candidates in the field of applicants. Having said that, I know that in the end, because all 3 of the people who voted for him are present at this meeting, one of which was the mayor, that you're right, that in the end, it's probably going to end up the same way. And, well, I just lost my train of thought, so it wasn't that important. I'm done.
Well, Mr. Leonard, Alderman Leonard, if you want to take a moment to think about it, I mean, this is an important item, so I'm not in any hurry.
Well, I just feel like we had 9 people apply for this position. And this is the 4th time as a board member I've sat through this process, dating back to when Alderman Lancey left and we appointed Alderman Don Hart. We had 9 people apply, which is remarkable. Ordinarily, it's 2 or 3. We had some exemplary applicants. We had some very highly qualified applicants. And I really don't think in the end that those applicants got a fair shake. What we're going to do now today is we're going to tidy up what we did wrong and make it right.
So Alderman Leonard, the way you're saying that, what you're actually doing is accusing the board members of not reviewing each applicant and voting the way that they felt was appropriate. And that's what they're paid to do. They're here today to represent the people of North Topsail Beach, to do what they feel is right. And I understand, and I see the grin, which is very unprofessional, but I will also tell you, let me speak. I did read Jerry's email, as everybody did. I also felt he did a good job of writing his opinions down. If you share those opinions, that's fine, but those are your opinions. And I feel actually it's out of order to accuse people of not voting properly.
I didn't accuse anyone of anything.
That's what you just said.
Okay. What I said was we had a crop of very highly qualified candidates. You state that you're doing what the citizens and the voters want, but you are in the process of appointing an individual who has run for office 4 times since his first term and who has lost in 4 elections. Clearly, he is not who the voters want, Joanne. Clearly, he is not.
Again, that you get to speak your opinion.
Okay, and I am. But here's the thing. When I speak my opinion and it differs from yours, that doesn't render it unprofessional.
I feel it's unprofessional, the tone of your voice and the way you're speaking to all of the board members.
You can feel anything you want, okay? However, your job here is to maintain order in this and to do it with a level of decorum. And talking down to me is not a level of decorum that I will accept.
But you talking down to everybody else is.
I'm not talking down to anyone. I am expressing my opinion.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've all heard enough of this discussion now. Mayor, I make a motion that we suspend the rules and ratify the vote for Mr. Swan.
Well, let's take it, if this motion passes, if the motion to suspend the rules passes, the next motion would be to appoint a nominee. I'm assuming it would be Alderman Swantek, based on what you just said, Alderman Benson, but It'd be two motions. The first one would be to suspend the rules. If that passes, then a motion to appoint, fill in the blank there, and then yay, nay vote. And if it's a tie, the mayor, if she desires, is not required to, would be able to vote to break the tie.
Okay, clerk, I make the motion to suspend the rules.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Mr.
I'll
Peters?
second the vote
Clerk, could you call roll, please?
nomination.
Alderman Peters, just a point of clarification, the motion on the table is to suspend the rules. And as Mr. Eads described, I'm not sure if you were able to hear it, but then the next motion would be to nominate someone to the seat. So just so you understand, you're seconding a motion to suspend the rules. Is that correct?
Are you asking me, Joanne?
I'm sorry, this is Laura. I'm asking if your second was to Mayor Pro Tem's motion to suspend the rules so that the board can go forward and fill the vacancy.
Alderman Peters, this is Town Attorney Brian Eads. Can you hear me okay?
I'm sorry, I can't hear now.
Alderman Peters, this is Brian Eads. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, barely. Mhm.
Okay. Alderman Benson made a motion to suspend the rules of procedure. It sounded like you said the word second. We want to make sure you understand that that's the motion that you are going to second. If that motion passes, the next motion would be to appoint someone to fill the vacancy. But we need the motion to suspend the rules first. So do you second that motion, sir?
I do. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Aye.
Alderman Peters?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Madam Mayor, the rules have now been suspended. It would be appropriate if someone wants to make a motion to appoint the vacancy that was created by your accepting the mayoral role. There, as we know now, there's another vacancy with Mr. Hyde's resignation, but so at this point, if there is a motion to appoint that vacancy, that would be in order.
I make a motion to appoint Robert Swantek as Alderman.
Do we have a second?
I didn't hear that nomination.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Peters, Mr. Benson just made a motion to appoint Mr. Swantek to the alderman position. And we're asking if there's a second. Could you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Is there any second? Any other motion? Mr. Peters, can you hear me?
Yes, Joanne. Mhm. Yes, Mayor.
Mr. Peters, Alderman Benson just made a motion to appoint Robert Swantek to fill the
In
vacancy.
regards to a nomination, I'll make the motion that we appoint Richard Green as a alderman.
Does he mean Richard Grant?
We can't have we have we have a motion on the table. Attorney Eads,
Well, it hasn't been seconded yet, and the mayor, after a reasonable time, can deem that motion to have died for a lack of a second.
If Mr. Peters in fact means Richard Grant and not Mr. Richard Green, I will second that motion.
Madam Mayor, have you deemed the first motion dead for lack
Hey,
of a
Laura.
second?
Laura,
Yes, sir.
you need to make sure that's what he
Well, what I would like to
Do, Brian, if you could please explain to Mr. Peters, who's having trouble hearing us, that there's two items on the agenda. One as it relates to Mr. Swantek, and then one as it relates to the other vacant board seat that we have. And that the one for Mr. Swantek now.
Right, if everyone else could mute to reduce any feedback. Mr. Peters, this is the town attorney, Brian Eads. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Brian, again, barely.
All right. Alderman
I'm not sure
Benson,
what you can do to increase the volume, but anything will be appreciated.
all right, let me see if I can do that. Give me one moment.
Now, Brian, I can't hear you. I did not hear you.
All right, Alderman Peters, how about now? Alderman Peters, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Alderman Benson made a motion to appoint Robert Swantek to the vacancy. Thus far, that motion has not received a second. If that motion does not receive a second, that motion will die.
Okay.
So you then made a motion before that motion was declared dead. So that's where we are right now. So what's on the table right now is Alderman Benson's motion to appoint Robert Swantek to fill the vacancy. The first vacancy, not Jerry Hyde's vacancy, the first vacancy. Unless that gets a second, that motion will die, and then we will move on to your motion at that point.
Okay.
Okay. So I take it, Mr. Peters, you do not want to second that motion?
That's correct.
Okay. Madam Mayor, since that constitutes all of the aldermen, that motion dies.
Okay, then we move on to Mr. Peters.
Mr.
Go ahead, Brian.
Mr. Peters, I understood you to say you would like to nominate Richard Green. Is that right? Or did you mean Richard Grant?
Grant or Green?
That's my question to you, sir. Who are you nominating?
I thought it was Green, but apparently it's Grant, is what you're saying.
I don't have the applications in front of me, but I'm not aware of a Mr. Green applying, and if the clerk could, or someone could confirm that, that would be helpful.
Sorry for the pause. I have several things I have to unmute and remute for feedback. But yes, I believe Richard Grant is an applicant.
And there is no Richard Green?
That's correct. There isn't.
Mayor, it appears to me that Alderman Peters has made a motion to nominate or to appoint Richard Grant to fill one of the first vacancy. Alderman Leonard, do you second that motion as clarified? Any discussion?
I will lead off the discussion. I think that Richard Grant's application is impressive. He has exemplary credentials. He has attended several of our meetings. And each time he has gotten up and spoken at open forum, he's offered this board good suggestions. And I think he would be an extremely valuable asset to the town's Board of Aldermen.
Can you call roll, Laura?
Yes. Alderman Leonard,
Aye.
Alderman Peters,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Benson.
Nay.
So the motion carries 2-1, Mayor.
Okay, on to the next item. We do have to also discuss Jerry Hyde's vacancy and how the board would like to move forward with that. So for the vacancy for Jerry Hyde, we have several options. We've got the applications that we've already received that we have the opportunity to possibly review, and I am looking for the town attorney's input here as well. But we have as Alderman Leonard had said, we have several already on file that's only been a couple weeks. So we certainly could look at those. We could advertise again, and then we need to determine when we are ready to make our selection and have our vote. So I'd like to open that discussion up to the board. Alderman Leonard.
Yes, I think what we should do is go ahead and re-advertise it with the understanding that those applications that are currently on file that were submitted for this past selection remain unless any of the candidates come forward and specifically ask to be removed from consideration. And I think that given where we are in the month, we go ahead and advertise it quickly, and that we make the decision in our June regularly scheduled board meeting.
Do we have?
I'll second that motion.
I didn't know that was a.
Yes, sir.
We had to cancel the retreat yesterday. Is it possible that we're going to have the retreat next Wednesday? And if so, is it possible that we could appoint the vacancy at that retreat?
I don't think it's enough time. If somebody wants to put an application together and get it in, you're telling them you basically got the long weekend to do it. And I think that if there is anyone who wants to go ahead and apply, we need to provide ample time, and I'm not sure that it is, that constitutes ample time. I mean, we're 21st of the month.
Yeah.
We get a long weekend and next week, and then the following week, I think the meeting. That's probably more.
I'm just saying.
I think that just works better.
I'm just saying that we already went through this process and people had like 3 months to think about it, and we got 9 applications. I just wonder if there are that many more people that are going to put an application in. That's my concern.
Probably not. And in fact, there may in a couple cases be people who withdraw their applications, but I just think from an appearance perspective that we need to give people time. And we're just talking about a week, Mike. Okay, a week.
So we have a motion and a second, right?
Well, I don't know if it was a motion, but I'll make it as such.
And I believe Alderman Peters can second.
Mhm.
Okay.
So Clerk, can you call roll?
Yes, Alderman Peters, can you hear me?
So the motion, So to restate, the motion is that we will re-advertise, provide a deadline, and then make the selection in June, correct?
Yes.
Okay, at the June regular scheduled board meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Alderman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Vincent?
Aye.
Okay, so, yes, sir.
Okay, point of order, Mayor. I'd like to ask Attorney Eads the advice on the election of Mayor Pro Tem at our last board meeting. Could you clarify where we
Yeah.
are with that election?
Yes, the same thing happened with respect to the Mayor Pro Tem appointment. However, under rule, I believe it's 38, and Laura, please help me if I'm wrong. It's either 37 or 38. Our rules of procedure internally does allow for the mayor to vote to break a tie. On a vacancy is one thing. On an internal election of one elected official to that title, I think that our rules of procedure allows the mayor to vote in that limited setting because our internal rules of procedure provide for that. It provides for the mayor to vote in the event of a tie. I think, and I'm hearing myself feedback now. And I say that because whoever is ultimately elected internally to be the mayor pro tem has already been elected by the people. So I think there's a distinction between filling a vacancy and internal selection of a mayor pro tem that is governed by our internal rules of procedure. In other words, the mayor pro tem can vote whether he or she is just an alderman or the mayor pro tem. There's no legal distinction. The only difference is under our rules, the mayor pro tem would preside over the meetings in the event the mayor is unable to or not there.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Brian, I think the issue here is whether or not, I mean, that vote was also different than a yay nay vote where the mayor actually chose an individual as opposed to breaking a yay nay tie. And my understanding of our rules after having reviewed them was that the mayor's tie-breaking authority for voting was for yay nay votes. Can you comment on that for me, please?
That is the statute, and I believe that there's a distinction between the mayor voting on a motion of the board versus, for instance, to pass an ordinance or a resolution, as opposed to the internal selection of the mayor pro tem. But if you'll give me a moment, I'm going to pull up our rules of procedure on my other computer. Just give me one moment, and I'll read you the actual rule. Okay, I have it. Just let me turn to it. It's rule 38C, the mayor may not make nominations. The mayor may not vote on appointments under this rule unless there is a tie.
Okay.
If someone wants to make a motion, I think it's within the notice to address that. I mean, you can do that. Just to me, there's a difference between a vacancy and the internal selection of someone who's already on the board as the mayor pro tem. Our rules of procedure say that if there's a tie, it doesn't say tie by way of yay nay votes, tie by way of written ballots. It says a tie. And as I recall, that I don't have those minutes in front of me, but as I recall that meeting, in the general sense of the word tie, there was a tie. And correct me if you disagree with me.
No, I agree with you. And based upon your reading of our rules, that one was done right. The other one was not, in my estimation, in my opinion, and I appreciate the clarification.
Right. And again, you know,
Mike bringing it up for discussion to where we're all in the same field here. Look, guys, all I want us to do is do the right thing, and I want us all to succeed. And I don't think lately, sometimes we've been doing the right thing.
Well, if I may comment on that, Mayor, I strive to follow all legal procedure. This doesn't make it right, but historically, these items have not been what I would call controversial of any significance. We had a prior vacancy filled the same way. There's no problems. The mayor voted to break a tie. Mayor pro tem, I believe when you were elected mayor pro tem, that same procedure was followed and Mayor Tooman broke the tie.
Yes.
Just because we've done it wrong in the past doesn't make it okay to do it now. But the truth of the matter is the procedure that we followed was procedurally defective, if you will. I am going to take a long, hard look at our rules of procedure now that this has come to fruition and to the forefront, and we'll be making some strong recommendations as to revise them. If you have a situation where you have equal number on the board trying to fill a vacancy, that process could end up in a eternal stalemate and the vacancy could never be filled. So I think that needs to be addressed. And it will be addressed, at least it will be proposed to you for your consideration.
Well, if I can say one more thing. When I went digging through our rules and went digging through the UNC School of Government blog, what I was looking for was to try to determine whether a board member who serves as an appointee fills the remainder of the term to which he was appointed that was left. In other words, 4 years for someone who would have been appointed today, or if that person fills the vacancy until the next municipal election. And unless the attorney corrects me, my understanding is that the appointee fills the term until the next municipal election, which in turn means that in November of next year, it could get real interesting in North Topsail Beach because all 6 of us seats are up for grabs, the mayor and all 5 board members. And that was kind of why I started looking to see where we were with this whole thing, just for my own knowledge. And that's when I went to Brian and said, hey, I think we might have a problem here. And I went to Brian with it, and only to Brian initially, because it was an attorney-client kind of question, and I didn't want to push the panic button with the remainder of the board in the event that, hey, it was nothing. And so that's kind of how this whole thing went down the roller coaster ride that it was on this morning.
Okay, good. Everybody good to move on?
I would like clarification from Mr. Eads. So the discussion was, is that appointment that we just made for alderman for 4 years, or is it until the next municipal election? I didn't hear your answer, Mr. Eads.
Brian, you're muted.
Wish I could mute myself more often. Alderman Leonard is correct. It's to the next municipal election. I understood him to ask me to correct him if he was wrong, and I think he's correct. So that's why I didn't chime in.
Okay, moving on. The next item is Mr. Gilbride, Town Manager Gilbride, if you could just give us an update on the recent meetings regarding the federal project to just kind of get us all on the same page as what you guys know.
The federal project, the numbers keep moving a little bit, but at this point, the Corps of Engineers is looking at Surf City and North Topsail being jointly responsible for the what they call the local portion of the project, which is approximately $83 million. They were not addressing any participation by the state. We've been looking at it from the standpoint of what is it going to cost North Topsail Beach? And that cost has ballooned over the last 10 years to where now it is close to $15 million. The state is involved, and we were able to contact the correct people at the state who are now working on their portion of the funding, which will be about $42 million. But it is unclear whether or not it's required for both Surf City and North Topsail Beach to choose the one of two options, that being paying up front their portion of the cost or financing their portion of the cost over 30 years. If we were able to separate our part of the project and finance over 30 years, we would pay approximately $6 million in interest over that time. We have a conference call going this afternoon with the Surf City personnel to see what it is they've decided to do, because their costs obviously have ballooned as well, probably to close to $25 million. North Topsail Beach, of course, has been conducting projects over the years so that we do not have the huge war chest that Surf City has, since they have done nothing, as far as I know, over the last decade or so or more. So we're curious to find out this afternoon just what their plan is, and then to reapproach the Corps of Engineers. Coley Cordero from the state was going to contact Pam Castens, who's the point person for the Corps of Engineers, to explain the state's needs with this financing, because they only want to approve 1/3 of the money per year for the next 3 years and to pay upon completion. Corps of Engineers is looking for us to start paying when the project begins. So that's basically where we're at now. We're just trying to work our way through the financing choices.
Mr. Gilbride, the only question I have, and first of all, I appreciate all the time that you guys have been spending on this. I believe in the meetings, it's been Alderman Leonard, Alderman Benson, and yourself, sir, that's spending a lot of time to understand what this project is and where are we and how can we accomplish it. The only question I have is for phase 5, we already have a loan on phase 5. Can we have 2?
Well, that's a fair question, and I don't really know. The loan for phase 5 that we're paying was through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This, of course, would come directly through the Congress. So I think And I'm sure the Alderman would agree with me that the answers we received from the Corps of Engineers, they don't have a clue how all this works either. We couldn't get a sensible answer to any of it. So we will continue to pursue it, but I really don't know how to answer your question.
Well, one of the things that I had even thought as a consideration was, could we roll the two together? That, because, and not even just thinking out loud, pros and cons, or whether or not it was something that was available as an option, primarily because of the sinking fund associated with that current loan. And if we were getting a loan through the Congress, it may not require the sinking fund, it would free up cash. And just, is it another potential financing option for us? And as the interim manager stated, we didn't, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. There's still many more questions than there were answers provided during our conference call meeting with the Corps.
Okay. Do you
So I
think
don't know.
do you believe, all of you, that we will have enough information to discuss at the retreat next week as far as what the options are? Because my thought process is, if we're going through the budget, certainly this needs to be factored in. And I just don't, it sounds like there are so many open questions still.
Well, Mayor, what I think we need to do is discuss it, whether we have enough information or not, simply so that we get thinking about it, and we get thinking about it while we have our finance officer there who sat in on the meeting last week. And I suggested to the manager that the finance officer begin to really get her feet wet with this, because we need some of her expertise to guide us. And I want her involved, because I think, she's the one who keeps the books, and she can tell us, whether or not we're driving off a cliff financially as we go forward. So I think regardless of where we are with knowing enough to make decisions, we certainly need to discuss the issue in detail during the retreat. And what do you think, Mike?
Well, I just want to add that we have requested to our Army Corps liaison person in Wilmington clarification about the loan. Would there be a sinking fund? Would there be a 10-year 10% payment to build up so-called last payment like we have with our USDA loan? She does not have those answers readily, but we'll contact the financial division of the Army Corps to try to get those answers. And hopefully we'll have them by the time we have the retreat. But if we don't, you're right, we need to discuss the situation, because the other aspect of this that we haven't even talked about yet is what's called operation and maintenance. And this cost is over the 50-year life of the program. And as Manager Gilbride just indicated, the costs have ballooned. Well, the O&M costs for the 50-year project have gone out of sight, in my opinion, like tripled from what they were estimated 10 years ago. So we've got to consider that, because every renourishment cycle, we're going to be, it's a 50-50 after the first construction. So we will need to be thinking about how we're going to finance the 50-year project as well as the first part of the project.
And I believe we do have this as an agenda item already on the retreat, but could we just verify? I'm sure, I believe it's there. Okay. The next item was, I just wanted to talk about the Memorial Day weekend and just be able to share with the board, Mr. Gilbride, what the staff is preparing and how we're planning on getting through this.
We began looking at Memorial Day weekend with last weekend in the rearview mirror, and we're prepared to staff for a similar disaster. The police will have additional personnel on, of course, for the weekend, and the fire department has at least 3 additional persons on for ocean rescue. But at the same time, we're keeping an eye on the weather forecast, and the weather may be the friend of our emergency responders this weekend. So we will be prepared to come back on the staffing if it indicates that we're not going to be inundated with visitors for the weekend. But we're generally prepared to go right ahead this weekend.
Parking at the north end and driving out on the beach to park, I am of the understanding that we will have the attendant out there from the parking company effective this weekend.
Yes, sir. The booth has been, it was installed actually yesterday. The parking people are out there tomorrow morning, first thing, to set everything up, and they will be controlling parking at the north end. Chief and I have also been discussing putting on a couple of specials or interns simply to write parking tickets. We don't have to write a lot of tickets to cover their salary costs.
Okay. Yeah, I was up there last weekend and there wasn't a square inch to park another vehicle. It was packed because it was such a nice weekend and people have been cooped up for so long. And the rumor on Facebook was, and I underscore the word rumor, was that the kiosk wasn't taking money or wasn't working. And that, you know, the number of folks that we had out there at $20 a pop, you know, did we, you know, lose a couple of grand worth of parking fees?
Yeah.
But as long as that's, I'm glad to hear that that's manned. And I assume that with the manning, they've also done whatever adjusting and maintaining to the kiosk to make it work.
Yes, that was actually done earlier this week.
Okay. Great.
And we did used to sell the annual passes
Right.
too. So some of those folks up there, even though you saw a tremendous amount of volume, they could have had
Sure.
annual passes that are still
Mhm.
good. So if that makes you feel any better, it might not have been as bad as I don't know.
But it's big a loss. Yeah. Okay.
And the other question that I had too was, and the reason that I'm glad that we're considering bringing interns in, will they be, will we won't have that for this weekend though, right?
I have one that I can use this weekend.
Okay. Because what happened last weekend, when I know there was a lot of frustration from residents and visitors as far as the parking and being able, and the traffic in general. But on top of that, we also had a major accident on Island Drive. We had water rescues, and my concern is that I would like our police officers and our first responders to be able to focus on those types of activities and hopefully cut down on the people who are clearly parking where it says do not park in between these signs.
We'll have an extra police officer this weekend.
Okay.
One of the things that the manager and I discussed earlier in the week, and I put in that email to you over the weekend, was it seems that we're missing some no parking signs that may go all the way back to Florence. It may be that people see a no parking sign and see that it's easy to remove and it gets removed so they can park there. I mean, some of these folks have gotten really innovative on, you know, it's like the corner lot down the road from your house. And I mean, everywhere, if they could fit a car there was a car there. I saw, in fact, and sent a text to the chief on Sunday with a photo of the Cama access at Oyster Lane. We went to the beach on Sunday and there was a pickup truck parked in the walkway between the two houses that constitute the access, just parked there, locked up and gone. So people are parking everywhere.
And then also for this weekend, the restaurants will be open 50%. And I believe, Mr. Gilbride, that you had emailed or tried to at least get in touch with all of the restaurants. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've shared with them as far as, I believe we're asking them for compliance, but we're.
Yeah, I had received specific directions from the county manager on what was going to be allowed for restaurants, the 50% capacity and social distancing. I emailed those directions to each of the larger restaurants at Villa Capriani and St. Regis. And then I drove over to the Tiki Bar and the Beach Bums and made sure they had it as well. So the restaurants are should certainly be familiar with what the rules are and hopefully will comply over the weekend.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. And then what I had, this also ties into that. So what I had discussed briefly with Mr. Gilbride as well as the town attorney, and I think Alderman Leonard, we may have talked about it too, was what I would like to do is update the state of emergency to allow us to be able to tow cars if it gets to the point where we have to do that. We do not currently have that in our ordinances. We have writing the citations, and certainly we don't want to tow people. That's just extra. We
can't
can,
tow people off of a public right of way.
if they're parked where it says no parking, we still can't tow them.
We have to put a sticker on by law. And we'd have to go up to 72 hours and notify them that we were towing them.
So that's not an option for us anyway.
Yeah. So every one of those cool things I wrote to you in that email that I thought we could do to kind of maintain control here and minimize some of the issues that we've had last weekend. The chief and I met informally the other day. We can't chalk tires because it's trespassing. We can't tow cars unless we put a sticker on it, like he just said. That and we can't raise the fine beyond $50.
I did know that.
I mean, all my ideas went right by the wayside. So
I did know about raising the fine. I didn't know that we had to sticker them first. So it doesn't help then to update the state of emergency with that. Mr. Eads, do you have a comment on that?
Hear me?
Yes, now I can.
I'm trying, I don't want you to hear the backdrop in my home. So I'm switching to this. I am not countermanding what, I believe that was the chief that
Yes,
just
sir.
spoke. I believe in a state of emergency, the rules are
Mr.
different
Eads, do you
and that
have
we would be able to tow. Particularly if it's a situation where emergency vehicles are having ingress and egress issues. At one of our conference calls amongst the three towns, I believe it was earlier this week, there was some discussion about how long it would take to get not only on the island but off the island, and a emergency event as more people are on the beach in the unfortunate but inevitable event if someone needs emergency medical care and it takes an hour to get off the island because people are parked in a manner that slows down ingress and egress of emergency vehicles. I believe in a state of emergency, especially provided we state it in the declaration, that would trump other law. The General Assembly has specifically bestowed upon municipalities certain rights in a declared state of emergency, and controlling traffic and movement within your jurisdiction is one of those rights in a state of emergency. So I think we have the legal authority to tow if needed. I don't know that we would do it frequently, but if there's someone parking, blocking a street or making it very, very difficult to negotiate down that street or through that street, in that event, we would want to tow them and probably need to tow them.
Discussion?
I would like to see us be able to tow it. I'm just concerned about where the chief comes in on this and what we have to do to put together the mechanism. Do we have to do like the highway patrol does, set up a rotation among local towing companies, or, you know, how hard is it going to be? And then do we have to post that violators will be towed? You know, and how, you know, because that sounds a little more permanent than an authority that is granted due to a state of emergency. You know, I guess the mechanics of this thing are a little bit, it's a little bit concerning. I'd love to see us be able to do it. I'd love to see us be able to do it starting like about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. But I don't see that as a possibility.
Chief?
I don't think, I agree with Brian, we could do that, but the way they were parking was not causing us any problems with any emergency vehicles.
Okay.
If they're parked on the roadway at all, we already told them for that. And we do have a rotation with the records in the local area. So we would do that. But, so if they are causing us problems with emergency vehicles and all, we could tell them yes, but we did not have that problem.
So my response would be, Steve, that you've addressed that question. We should not really change the state of emergency. And I believe that we had, as everybody knows, just dependent demand last weekend, beautiful weather. It was a combination of perfect storm, so to speak. And it'll probably be that way again this weekend. But as long as the emergency vehicles have the access that is needed, I think in time, things will go back to normal. So.
In talking with the other town mayors, we've been doing that weekly, as you all know, just to try and stay in contact with each other as we get through this pandemic and share common issues, which we all seem to have to different degrees. Certainly Surf City has more commercial than we do, so we don't have any of that. But the feeling is that this is going to be a long summer. This is not something that's just gonna magically dissipate after Memorial Day weekend, especially with a lot of people still working from home. And hopefully it will get a little bit better this weekend because you can go out to dinner. You can hopefully go back to church. There are some things you can do, whereas last weekend, the beach was pretty much it, other than the grocery store. But I do think it's something that we need to just keep in our minds. And that is one of the reasons I've seen a lot of feedback about why are we still under state of emergency. These discussions are exactly why we're still under state of emergency. If we need to adjust or tweak them so that we're able to support our residents and also respond to any other additionals that come up with this pandemic, that's why it's there. So go ahead, Mr.
2 points. One, going back to what we had originally discussed, which was modifying the current state of emergency to allow towing. I'm trying to figure out where we are with that and probably need some legal advice. Are we going to do that? Because Mayor Pro Tem just made it sound like it wasn't necessary, and I thought it was a good idea. Secondary to that, to your comment about it's going to be a long, busy summer, one of the issues that we haven't addressed, but I think all of us who've lived here a while have begun to see, are all of these new housing developments and apartment complexes, most of which advertise just being minutes away from the beach, are driving more and more people here every weekend. That's nice. So some of it is exactly what you said. A lot of it is. A lot of it also is that we just have a higher population density, not on, but adjacent to our coast. That this is going to be, and I hate to use the phrase because it's gotten really popular since this whole COVID business, but this is going to be the new normal. And as we lean into things like our board retreat and what we need to do for police and fire and just traffic management and crowd control and things like that, these are things that I guess as board members and elected officials and town managers and department heads, we need to be looking at is what's going to happen next. You know, what is the battle after next here? Because this ain't going away, even if all the COVID stuff does. But back to my question for the board and the attorney, are we going to modify the state of emergency to include towing, or are we not?
My suggestion in talking with the other mayors and also the town manager and Mr. Eads, what I would do is I would recommend that we do add it to the state of emergency. I don't believe it causes any harm, but it allows us to utilize that if it gets to the point where we need to for any reason.
Madam Mayor, if
yes, sir.
I'd like to weigh in. It's to echo what you just said. We don't know what's going to happen this weekend. I would much rather us be in a position to have the authority to tow and not have to tow anyone then need to tow, but not have the authority because we did not amend our state of emergency. That gets back to the theme. This is not a mean-spirited effort by the town. If people cooperate and comply, then no one will get towed. Even if we pass it, we may not tow anyone. Again, it's another tool in our arsenal to help control the population within our town during this pandemic. And it is my hope that if we do tweak it, which I do recommend we do, that we don't have to use it because people comply and park where they're allowed to park. But I would hate for something to happen over the weekend or Memorial Day when there's a bunch of people on the island and there's a need to tow, and then we're breaking the law by towing because we did not amend our declaration accordingly. So my recommendation would be to amend it to inform the public of the possibility of towing. Hopefully that will increase compliance, and hopefully we won't need it.
I just want to add to that, Attorney Eads. The other example I would use for needing this ability, if we needed it, is when you looked at the Jeffries lot, that really nice day, I think it was Saturday. Sunday it was not so nice, but Saturday, some of those were parked 4 deep. I mean, you would not be able to get out of that lot if you had to. So who do they call, and what would we even do at that point? If you've got, say, a child that is sick from being out in the sun and needs to get home, what do you do? And how would it, I mean, I just think that that's a good example. And again, I'm thinking of public safety. It's not that I don't want people to come to the beach and have a nice time, but what I saw on Saturday was unsafe in so many ways. That's a good example. The way they're parking on the street, and I know that we're putting up the additional signs that may be lost, but it's just not safe. If it was safe to park there, we'd have already been allowing parking to be there. Like those access areas in front of Bay Court and Marina Way are a little bit wider than some of the other shoulders on New River Inlet. So we felt they were wide enough for people to be able to get out of their car safely and go to the beach. So I would prefer, and it's my recommendation, that we do add it to the state of emergency. The other thing I'm wondering is, we did the nice press release that we worked with Onslow County on. I did an interview that was on the news as well, just again, with the same message, not asking people not to come. Please feel free to come to the beach, but please just respect being here and what our rules and regulations are as it relates to trash and parking and public safety. I don't know if we need, we need some type of sign up, like, one of those electronic signs that says, parking will be enforced or something at the bridge when they're coming over, because I'm not sure what else to do to get the message out. Alderman Leonard.
I think that's a good idea. And I echo everything you've said. Our job as elected officials, as one of our former managers used to like to say, Steve Foster, was that our job is to protect lives and property. Mm-hmm. And when you get someone who's got their car in the middle of a parking conglomerate that they can't get out of to take their kid to the hospital because he's got sun poisoning or something, it's not safe. And there was a lot of stuff I saw Saturday that was not safe. And it was stuff that, unless you had an officer right there at that point in time, which is just not practical and understandable why, it wasn't correctable. But I think an electronic sign might be a good idea if we can pull it together at this stage of the game before the weekend. And I applaud the good job that all of our first responders here in North Topsail Beach are doing. And they've got a heck of a job in front of them to do with all the people that come here every weekend now, and they're doing a great job. I saw our code enforcement guy out on his Polaris on Saturday on the beach, and he was engaging with people and reminding them that glass bottles of beer really aren't acceptable on the beach, and he was doing it a courteous way, and he was getting the kind of results that you hope you get when you're courteous with people who are out enjoying a day at the beach. So I agree with everything he said.
Alderman Johnson, Mayor Pro Tem.
I think we're talking about two different situations here. We were talking about people blocking each other in, particularly in that first section of the Jeffries lot. They are not parking illegally there. That is a parking lot. So the police would not have any legal responsibility. The responsibility would fall on us and Public Works to line off that parking lot and designate where you can park, which is going to would be rather difficult because it's a gravel lot, and when it rains, the lines would dissipate. But the other thing on the towing, I can see the legal point that maybe we do need to have that in place under the state of emergency. But with 24 hours notice, how many of the public are really going to know that as of let's say tomorrow, their car might be towed if it happens to be parked in an area that's determined to be unsafe?
We actually put that additional parking enforcement would be in place in the press release, and we also mentioned it in the interview. So hopefully the word is getting out. Onslow County is also doing the same thing. Commissioner Bright was here Saturday. It was a perfect day for him to come Saturday afternoon, and he said it took him about 3 hours to get back off the island and back to 17. So he did live through it himself as well. So we do have the support to do that. And what I'll do is I'll work with staff to update that, the state of emergency to just include that. And then I will leave it up to you guys as far as the electronic sign. I don't think it could hurt, but really if it's up to staff if you think that that's going to be beneficial or not. And then
Madam
the
Mayor,
only other, yes, sir.
I think the sign's a good idea. The key is public education, and if they don't know they're doing something that's not compliant, then to Alderman Benson's point, I think the sign's a great idea. I hope you guys will go that route. And Alderman Benson, we will have this discretion in the towing. It won't be, as I understand it, and as I know Chief Young, every tiny infraction will not likely lead to a tow. I'm talking about significant public safety issues. We can address in the state of emergency that you cannot park in a manner that you're blocking somebody else in any public parking lot. And if we need to, we can address later by a text amendment our code of ordinances to have something similar like that. If it's not already there, I haven't researched it, but we can address the scenario where it's an open parking lot and you might have people 4 deep and it's technically not illegal. We can make that to where that's not allowed. But again, education and compliance will get us as open and back to normal as quickly as possible. So I'm all for a sign.
Thank you, sir. My only other question, and this would be to staff as well, is the Onslow County parking lot, Beach Access 4. They have started working on that lot. I believe the anticipated completion for that, they're repairing the building and the lot, is 3 months out. They were trying to see if they could improve upon that. So they have gone to some additional efforts because they also realized that folks were walking through there still and parking there. And so they did put up some additional barricades that would keep people from driving into it. People are still walking into it and going underneath the building, which I know they still had some additional concerns about. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that either. They're parking legally, I believe, close to that access, and they're walking through the parking lot of Beach Access 4, even though it says, do not enter, or it says something and there's construction materials there, they're still going through there. I don't know that there's anything else we can do there, or if there's any conversation we need to have with Onslow County about anything else they can do. But Chief, do you have any thoughts on that one? I mean, the concern is somebody's going to get hurt going through there and under there because it's not maintained right now and it's.
It's gonna be difficult. The sheriff did call yesterday, said we needed any help, he's gonna have extra deputies down here. So if it becomes a problem there on that county access, I'll
Call him.
call him.
Yeah, because I don't know that there's anything we can do to keep people from walking through.
You didn't have somebody posted.
So right now, the issue
That's
is,
the one.
right now, the issue is at the access itself, because the building is in the state of disrepair that's in the access itself is unsafe.
Well, the access is under the building. Yes, sir.
Right, so unless they can put a fence around it.
And they've done, I mean, there has
You
been
know.
fencing around it. They've taken down.
Well, that's the situation now, but the whole last year was park at your own risk, and they had put up the orange plastic barricade to make a funnel for people to walk under the corner of that building all summer long last year. So
Right, but this year they've come back, they've taken another look at it. The project has started. They don't want people going through there with when the construction is active. They also understand it's not safe to be walking through that building. So the only reason I brought it up is I can't change last year, but this is where we're at this year. So if there's anything that we need from them, if we see a problem there, if we could please get with Onslow County because they have been supportive in trying to get it blocked off. Yes, sir.
Mayor, point of order, again, we are in a special meeting and this topic is the status of the state of emergency.
Yes, sir.
The condition of that beach access to the extent it relates to this state of emergency would be appropriate topic. Going beyond that, we need to respectfully reel it in, please.
And it was specific to the state of emergency from my perspective, Brian, but I understand what you're saying. Okay. I think that is what we had on the agenda for today. So what I would like to do is before I request to adjourn the meeting is I did want to welcome Mr. Grant to the board. I did speak with him personally and had told him I thanked him for putting in his application for the Board of Aldermen. So I'm very glad that he's going to be joining us and hopefully he's still interested in being an alderman. I haven't spoken with him in the last few days. So welcome, sir. And with that, I will ask for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
Do we need all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
You got it.
thank you all.